is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me address my first question to Councillor Kara. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. And glad to see there's a Chinook Arch in Calgary today. I lived in Calgary for almost 10 years and rode the LRT on a regular basis. That was prior to the Green Line. So I'd like to ask a little bit about, because one of my colleagues on this committee asked the previous panel about the interaction of municipalities and rail companies and where that overlaps in terms of rail safety. So from your perspective on municipal council, where do you see that, and can you comment further on that?
Well, I would say that I represent the East Calgary communities of Ward 9. It is the home to a lot of the rail infrastructure and also home to CP Rail's world headquarters. I'm also one of the longest standing members of council now, 4 terms in, elected alongside Mayor Nenshi in 2010. And I've spent the last 11 years of my life developing a more robust relationship with CP Rail than the city has enjoyed ever. And I would suggest that that relationship is really like diplomacy, because they are effectively another government altogether that we have absolutely no control over, no tangible means for interaction, and I think a historic legacy of thinking that we are operating mutually conflictual projects, us building a city and them running a railroad. So it's been 11 years of advances and setbacks, but I can say that we have a better working relationship with them now than we have had in decades. And that's due to actor relationships, not due to any sort of systemic framework that would really help build the kind of relationships that we need between our railroads and our municipalities. So I think that's a very key thing that needs to be addressed if we are going to accept the proposition that I put before you, that the railroad is critical to our long-term success in a low carbon future. And, I think when the railroad was established, the idea that the majority of Canadians would be living in big cities and towns was impossible to consider. But that's now exactly where the majority of Canadians live, and they need to have a much better working relationship with the railroad than we currently have. And it can't be based on the suburban model of segregation. It has to be based on a thoughtful mutual integration of this critical continentally scaled transportation infrastructure with a whole suite of mobility choices. So I would encourage anything that the federal government can do as you think about rail safety and you think about the relationship to the kind of future we need to have to consider and explore what kind of framework can be built for better relationships, because it cannot rely on actor-to-actor relationships.
All right. So switching gears, because this is a discussion and a reference to the study on rail safety, so to I think a couple people on the panel, if not everyone on the panel, to comment. When we talk about rail safety, one of the things we've seen reduced accidents in the past few years with less crude oil being shipped by rail versus pipeline. Pipelines, of course, are a safer way to ship, of course, natural gas and crude oil. And we saw of course, what happened in Lac Megantic. So, what are your comments around the interaction of, or the appropriateness of safety of pipelines versus shipping by rail?
You're asking me that question? I mean, I believe that some goods should be shipped by pipeline because it is way safer than shipping by rail. I think some things should be shipped by rail, and I also would suggest to you that the majority of things that we ship are shipped by truck. And, the estimates are that rail is 250 times more efficient and less carbon intensive than shipping something by truck. The trucks are also, I think we need to create an apples to apples comparison about what's a more dangerous mode, because the problem with the rail is that it is a point source of pollution. It's like when a plane goes down, it makes international news, but we know that people die in car crashes way more than they do. And no one gets freaked out about stepping into a car, but everyone has angst about stepping into a plane, and it's a much safer thing. I think the exact same analogy can be drawn about rail. And so I think absolutely we should be shipping things according to its safest way to go, and we should also be thinking we should also be wending our concepts of safety into climate. And I think for the foreseeable future, until we reach a low carbon environment or a zero carbon environment decades in the future, we will be shipping energy products that are carbon intensive, and we should do it in the least carbon intensive and the safest way possible. So if you're asking me as a Calgarian, and a Calgarian who is very environmentally forward, to talk about shipping, I do think that shipping by rail is definitely in terms of petrochemical products and petroleum and gas.
All right, let me ask a question of Mr. Isaac just before the time is up. You talked about fatigue management. I don't think we've talked enough about that. That's obviously important to rail safety. And maybe you can talk a bit more or elaborate more on what you talked about in terms of the best practices you'd like to see, what Transport Canada has done, what Transport Canada has not done, and what we should be looking at going forward.
Well, the big gap in the work rest rules right now that you're referring to is that they're a 3-year incorporation. That's how Transport Canada designed them. So we're not going to know the complete impact till 3 years plus from now. The fatigue management plans, we were told, were going to address the shortfalls in Transport Canada's, or in the work rest rules approved by Transport Canada. And we were supposed to be included on this process with the carriers. That didn't really happen. And I believe the Transport Canada is going to reject the draft fatigue management plans put forward for more than that basis. They are very incomplete, but from what I've seen. But we are hoping with our input that we can make those fatigue management plans much more robust and cover off the shortfalls that currently exist.